right, let's go ahead and get started. If you want to come in, if anybody's in the lobby and they want to come in, come on and join us. We're about to get started. Thanks for staying through. It's been a long day already, but hopefully we'll wake you up a bit. I'm going to start with another video clip for you today, okay? And here we go.
When's it going to happen? Here I am. There you are. Here I am, desperate for love, for truth. What are you going to do when you leave this building? Are you going to share with me what you've been learning here today? Or are you just going to bottle it up and pull it out next week for your friends? Now, when I say share, I'm not talking about every tactic you've used on me in the past. Like judging my every move, telling me I'm a bad person, pointing fingers, giving me disgusting looks. And my favorite is when you tell me that I'm lost. I don't even know what that means to be lost. Do you really think judging me is going to make me change? Would it make you change? Now, I know I'm a bad person. I've done bad things. But I don't need you to tell me that. What I need is for you to pick me up when I fall down. To be there when I'm broken. Yes, there's something missing in me. There's a void in my heart that I don't know how to fill. You have it. You have that thing that makes you whole. You know that person that I need to know. So I'm watching your every move. I'm watching where you go and what you say and do. Because I'm desperate for something real. I need something genuine. To know that there's something more here than this. I mean, this can't be it, really. And I think you know that. Listen to me. I need you. I need you to be here for me. I need you to walk out right now, ready and willing to do whatever it takes. Hey, it may not be comfortable. It may not be easy. But I need you to show me love. No matter the cost, show me what unconditional love really looks like. Stop telling me about this God of yours and show me who he really is. Honestly, I'll probably resist you. I'll probably argue with you and laugh at you. Even when you fall, I'll probably call you a hypocrite. But don't give up on me. Please don't give up on me. So I'm going to ask you, when's it going to happen?
To me, creating a culture of evangelism is about learning to live it out in your own life. And realize that most of what happens is one-on-one kind of thing. I believe that Jesus Christ is spread one person at a time by casual contact. People do make decisions, like I talked about at the last session, at events, but they need the one-on-one contact in order to make it happen. I had a neighbor. We used to do things all the time together, and we would barbecue together. Gil and I are the type that we'll have people over for a barbecue. We'll have our neighbors over. We'll say, bring whatever you want to barbecue. We'll grill it. And I had a guy, show up with fish, and we're vegetarians, and we're not going to eat it. And some guy showed up with, I didn't even ask. We just grilled it. And then I had a guy show up one time. He out of his pickup, he grabs an 8-pack of beer. And he holds it up. Hey, Raj, what do you want me to do with this? We're in the front yard playing volleyball, right? And he drives up like this, and I got all the church members around, and he pulls out this beer. What do you want to do with that? And I'm like, stick it in the fridge, hide it, do whatever with it, stick it somewhere else. I don't want to see it. And my thing was, I'm not going to be judgmental about what you bring to a barbecue. I'm going to try to teach you that there's a better way of life. But that's going to take some time. But this one neighbor friend of mine and I, we lived next door, but we were on 2¼ acres each. And we were looking for a better way to mow our field. And then I had the best way. He had a nice big brand new John Deere riding mower. And he thought he had a better way, but I had a better way. I had a 13-year-old son. And push, and that was the best way for me. I didn't have to do it. But we were looking at buying a tractor. He wanted a tractor, I wanted a tractor, put a brush hog behind it. You can mow that field in just a little bit of time, not a big deal. And you can mow neighbors' fields. We had a ditch and whatever else that needed mowing. And I said one day to him, there's a tractor over there. We should go look at it. And we contemplated buying it together. My wife said, no way are we buying it with anybody else. We're either buying it or letting him buy it and we're going to borrow it. And I said, I like the borrow idea. We'll see how that goes. But I told him about this tractor. We drive over there. We look at the tractor, and we're always talking about this and that. We put in wells together and sprinklers, and we always were commiserating on how to make it happen. And when we went and looked at the tractor, I remember coming back in the car as we were driving back, and I said to him, I said, Greg, your one daughter's graduated from high school, she's in college now. Your other daughter's getting ready to graduate here in a couple of years. How come you never took them to church? Just a simple little question. He says, I guess we just grew up as C&E Christians and never felt it was important. I said, what's a C&E Christian? He says, Christmas and Easter. That's when we went to church. I said, oh. I said, have you ever felt a need to, introduce your daughters to some spiritual things? He said, yeah, sometimes, but, it's not real big for me. And I said, and at that point, the evangelist part of me wanted to jump in and say, get on your knees and to confess Christ. But I knew I couldn't. It would be twisting his arm. And I don't believe that we should be used car salesmen when we're trying to win. If any of you sell cars, I apologize. But I don't believe that we should be the proverbial. How about that? The proverbial used car salesman trying to twist their arms to accept Christ. And so I just threw the ball back into his court and said, if you'd ever like to talk some more about it, I'm available. And we live next door, we saw each other all the time. And he says, okay, thanks. And I just, it's like playing tennis. I hit the ball into his court, he's got to hit it back. If he doesn't hit it back, I'm not going to chase him. And it was about 6 or 8 months later that 9/11 happened. And my friend Greg is a civil engineer. He builds things. And he comes over to my house after he gets off work. He says, did you see what happened? I said, didn't everybody? We were all standing around the shop. He says, I've designed buildings. I've designed structures. That's not supposed to happen. He says to me, can you tell me what's going on in the book of Revelation? Sometimes evangelism and preparing the way and creating a culture of evangelism is just you and I living our lives in a way that creates spiritual conversation. One of the things that we did in Colorado, and I try to do where I am now, and I've done it for years before, is we as a church tend to create some barriers in front of people so that they don't hear the gospel. They don't hear us even when we're talking it. My deal, I had that church elder say to me probably 25 years ago. He says, if we preach it, now it's up to them. I said, if I speak to them in French and they only speak Spanish, I haven't preached to them. Mm-hmm. If I can't figure it out and preach it in a language they understand, the average non-Christian doesn't understand all the Christian lingo that we use. I grew up in a family. I didn't know what the Lamb of God was. I didn't know what the cross of Christ was. The only time I heard the name Jesus Christ was in a swear word. I had no concept. When I showed up at church and they sang Rock of Ages, I'm like, is that a band? I was like, when we sang the song Here I Raise My Ebenezer, it's now one of my favorite hymns because of the depth of what it says. Mm-hmm. But I had no idea as a non-Christian. So I'm a pastor now, and I'm at my first church. And this lady comes to me. She is not an Adventist. She's a lady. She's my age. I'm in my 20s. Gail and I are newlyweds. And she comes to me and she says, Raj, who is Alan B. White? I've sat in Sabbath school. I've sat in church. Who's Alan B. White? And I almost started laughing. Alan B. White? What is that about? And then I realized some of the terms that we use within church, we just rattle off as if everybody understands it. And so I'm going to show you a couple more of those. We have the GC. We have potluck. Some people understand what potluck is. What's cradle roll? Is that kind of like an egg roll at Easter? You know, we're going to roll cradles? You know, what is that? You have Dorcas. You know, when I became a Christian and I saw these two old ladies in church call each other dorks, I said, what in the world is that about? I couldn't figure out what was going on. And then, of course, we serve Nutina, Loam and Linda, and tithes and offerings. Okay? What I've done in my churches to start creating a culture of outreach and evangelism is to clean up the terminology. You will never hear me get up front and talk about the GC. I will say, but here's what it does. It makes me say a paragraph every time I have to say something. I'll never say the GC has a special program. I'll say the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, that's the worldwide headquarters of our denomination, wants us to... Okay? So it takes a paragraph to say everything. But here's my deal. I believe we should be reaching out to seekers in our worship service. And in the worship service, people think, well, you got to have a special seeker service. I've gone down that road, and it worked for Bill Hybels and some others, but it's I don't see it working within the Adventist subculture. And I figured out, if I just explain what I'm talking about, there's nobody going to be offended by it. You know, I had a friend one day. She came to church. This is, man, I don't even know if we had, I guess we had one or two kids at that time. They were young. And I'm up front, and I did my little explanation. Instead of saying, it's communion, right? And instead of saying, it's now time to separate for foot washing, and everybody gets up and goes, I say, we do a thing in the Seventh-day Adventist Church that most churches used to do, but really not very many do anymore. And so if you're new here, you'll find this a little interesting. What we're going to do is we're going to separate, and the women are going to go down here, and the men are going to go there, and the couples are going to go down here. And we're going to do a thing called foot washing. And I went through a little explanation about why we do that and what Jesus said to do. And then everybody got up and left. And my friend, she's sitting about halfway down. She comes up to me, and she says, when you said everybody was going to go wash feet, I almost busted up laughing. She says, that was the funniest thing I'd ever heard in my entire life. She says, and I knew you're always joking with people, and so it's not a big deal. I almost busted up laughing. She says, and then everybody got up and left. She says, what in the world? And I came to some clear observation that people don't get what we talk about. You know, I mean, do you want to eat Nutina? I don't even want to eat it if it's out of a can. I don't like Nutina. Anyway. Part of creating a culture of outreach and evangelism is cleaning up that language. But I think there's some foundational steps that will take us down the proper road to get us there. And I think let's look at those now. The foundational step, I think, is we're going to get it to change, is about friendship. I teach my congregation to get involved in friendship evangelism. Because I think you can do that on a daily basis. I say have parties at your house, have a barbecue, invite your friends over, say whatever you want to grill, we'll grill, whatever it is in the summertime. You know, rent a gym at the local school and invite your small group and several other small groups to join you, and bring all your non-church friends. Let's go play volleyball or whatever else. I think friendship evangelism comes down to little things. It's going to the same checkout clerk at the supermarket when you buy food, and you learn their name, and you always, even if you have to wait longer in line, that's okay, because you talk to them and you're beginning to share with them. And that's part of friendship evangelism. But it's building friendships for the purpose of the kingdom. And I told you last night about Shane. I'm just going to retell that real fast. He got the idea of building friendships. And so he invited the Stacy and Roland that were in the video last night out to go drinking and dancing. And I had to grab him by the throat practically and say, you can't do that. This isn't about going back into the world. This is about building friendships for the kingdom. This is about redemptive friendships, pulling them out of the world. Well, to his credit, he finally figured that out, and he got a hold of it, and he made a complete shift. And he's actually drew a lot of people to God through his friendship evangelism process. I think friendship evangelism needs to be taught. When I was in Africa, we would sit on the front porch, and every night people would walk by, and they'd say, "Hey, Roger," or whoever else I was sitting with, they'd wave. And sometimes we'd go out to the road and we'd stand and talk to them. Sometimes they'd come up to the front porch and they'd talk to us. But we knew everybody's name. We knew where everybody lived. We knew what everybody was doing. In North America, most of us don't even know our next door neighbors' names, let alone where they work or what they do. When Gail and I first got married, she decided we lived in this place. We got married in February, so this would have been about June. She says, "I'm going to go pick some strawberries." And she gets all done. She says, "I'm going to give some strawberries to our neighbors." We lived in an apartment complex where there were 6 doors, 2, 2, and 2. We lived on the bottom floor. And so there are 2 floors above us, so there's 6 homes. And she knocked on the first door, and the lady opens the door, and she says, "Hi, my name's Gail. I just lived down here. We've lived here a few months now, and I just thought we haven't introduced ourselves. We thought I'd say hi, and here's some strawberries for you. Fresh picked." And the lady burst into tears. She says, "Thank you so much." She says, "I have lived here for 10 years. Nobody has said hi. Nobody has learned my name. Nothing. And I'm moving next week to someplace else. I hope things get a little better." She'd already put in her severance, whatever, and decided to move to the next place. And Gail's like, "Wow, that's amazing." She goes to the next door. Knock, knock, knock. A lady answers the door. And she says, "You're kidding." She says, "I'm moving in 2 weeks because I've lived here for 15 years and nobody's ever learned my name."
Wow.
In North America, we don't know our neighbors. We don't sit on front porches anymore. Do you know a home that's built today that has a front porch on it? We don't sit on our front porches anymore.
I do.
Okay, you do. Good.
No, I bought listen, when my wife and I sold our acreage, we prayed together as a team. Said, "Lord, you pick the house for us where you want us to work." And we put a bench on our front step, and we sit out there when the weather's pleasant, and we watch the kids play, everything. I know my neighbors down the whole block.
Well, and my wife and I make a point of meeting our neighbors too. And one of the ways that we do is we walk in our neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And we walk every day. We walk about an hour and a half every day. So about 5 to 7 miles we walk. And we've made it a habit. When we bought our first house, we said, "Oh, you live in so-and-so's house." We were the second owners of this house. The house was 40 years old when we bought it. Okay, so we were the second owners. And the previous owners were well known because the old guy that would sit there, he'd sit in the kitchen windows, which faced the big windows. He'd sit in the kitchen window, which faced the road. And every car drove by, he'd have his morning coffee. He'd wave to him. And I thought, what a good legacy for this house to have. So when people drove by, we would wave. And we've just been in a habit for, we've been married 26 years now, to wave to people. And we'll just wave. And as we're walking down the road, we'll wave. And sometimes people stop and talk to us. Some people will join us and they'll walk around the loop with us. And others we stand and we talk to for 15, 20 minutes. My kids will tell you we talk for 2 hours before we get back. But we'll, Kylie's over there. You quiet. But we stand and we get to know the neighbors. And I think that's crucial. Number one, as leaders of the church, we need to set the pace of developing that culture. And number two, we need to teach people. I had a lady come to me one time and says, you keep talking about friendship evangelism. She says, how in the world do you make a friend? I thought she was joking with me. But I think our culture has made it almost impossible to make friends anymore. Everybody's doing this when they're sitting on the bus or they're sitting at the grocery store. They're doing this with their phones anymore. Nobody's looking up. There's nobody to talk to.
You drive into your garage and not even closing the door. You leave them.
Yeah. My brother talks about his neighbor. He says, I only know he's around when his garage door goes up. He drives in. I wave to him. He doesn't wave back. He drives in. The door goes shut. But he said, but that guy actually came to my brother when his marriage failed, and he says, you know, you're the only person who's ever been nice to me. And my brother's like, all I've ever done is wave when you drive in the car. You know, he's the kind of talk to you, and it opened up a door. Friendship evangelism is a great door opener. Okay, I teach my people that most of you will not be able to lead a person to Christ because of your friendship evangelism. Roughly 10% of any congregation has any skills or giftedness for evangelism. And so what I tell them is make a friend and be an inviter. We're going to do services in the church, and you invite them and let somebody who has that gift preach to them. The next thing is the kindness. Maybe you've read the book, The Conspiracy of Kindness by Steve Sjogren. He talks about doing kindness, random acts of kindness in the community. And he hands out a business card with everything they do. On a hot day, they'll hand out cans of pop or bottles of water. And he'll hand out a business card with it that says, just wanted to show you God's love in a practical way. You turn the card over and it's information about where the church is. In Colorado, we used to do this. We once a year, we'd go out. We only did it once, actually, but we were going to do it every year. But where we'd hand out 9-volt batteries with a card taped to it that says, just wanted to show you God's love in a practical way. And we hand it to people and say, we just want to remind you to change your battery in your smoke alarms. And this is just one. You'll need some more, obviously, but we just wanted to show you God's love in a practical way. We'd hand out water bottles. Sabbath, we would leave church. We actually had water bottles printed up with their own labels on them, so we didn't have to bother to stick a card to it. And we'd go down to the soccer fields, and we'd hand them out. Some people say, stay away from the soccer fields and all that on Sabbath because it's a holy day. We just felt like that's where the people were. Let's go to them and let's hand them water bottles. And one day we went to the county fair that was in our town, and we just handed out water bottles. And we got a cooler there. People were walking in, and I'm just going like this as fast as I can. And this lady says, who are you guys with? I said, we're a church called The Adventure. She says, I've heard of you. And I'm like, awesome. If you heard of us because we're doing acts of kindness in the community, picking up garbage, some people would, in Sjogren, he talks about cleaning toilets, whatever it does, but doing acts of kindness. Friendship evangelism should happen on a daily, weekly basis with our members, right? Kindness projects, we try to do something once a month. At least once a month where we would invite the congregation to come and help. Several times we went out with spray bottles and squeegees. And we'd go to the Walmart parking lot and we'd wash windshields. And we'd sit down and we'd wash the windshields and put a tag underneath the windshield wiper. We washed your window today to show you God's love in a practical way. And on the back you turn it over was information about how to find our church. And once a month we would do some kind of act of kindness. So the next step would be to do bridge events. Bridge events are non-decision-making events. Traditionally, what we have done in the Adventist Church for bridge events is smoking, weight loss clinics, vegetarian cooking schools. They are designed to get people into the church doors without asking them for money or a decision. It's because half of the battle when it comes to getting a decision from people is getting them through the church doors. If they've already been there for a gardening class or an internet safety class or a financial money management class or something like that, if they've already been there, to come through the door when you actually see it in a brochure in your mail is way easier. We try to do a bridge event about once a quarter. So you see how it's building. Smaller amount of time, but we're building to it because to put on financial money management class. If you do a Dave Ramsey Financial Peace University class, that would fall into that category. Or you do something like that. If you design your own class, it takes a lot of effort to pull those together. You're not going to do those every week. You're not going to do those every month. And people are going to get tired of hearing it. We put banners out front oftentimes for our events. We just got some poles in the ground we hang these banners on and make sure it's advertised. We don't do a lot of mailing advertising for it. We'll sometimes do some newspaper. We'll sometimes do some radio. Most of it's word of mouth. We've got cards or something we'll pass out. But we're building from the friendship. If I'm making friends with you guys because you live in my neighborhood, and I say, hey, and then you see me washing windshields or handing out batteries or handing out water bottles or something, doing some act of kindness. Sometimes you might even join me in that, okay? Hey, that sounds like fun. Let me go join you with that. And once a month we're doing something like that. And then I say, we're doing this. You guys mentioned that you're having some troubles financially. We're having a financial management class. Would you be interested in coming? It's on video. It's taught by this famous radio guy. And I think you'd like it. He's funny. He's good. They said, yeah, I'll come. The next step, the next logical step is to reap. That's our traditional evangelistic series. I think that some of our evangelism and mailing out the brochures is planting seeds also, okay? Because I've had people who come to me and they say, we have seen your brochures come through, and they're always different. And this is in Colorado where we're always meeting on a different location too, because we never had our own facility. And so we would rent this facility, we'd rent that one, we'd go to this school, wherever we went. And we would, but this lady told me one time, she says, I've seen him, I've wanted to come to the last 7 or 8 of these. And I finally said, the next one that comes out, I am going to. I don't care what else is going on, I'm going to cancel everything else. So sometimes mailing those brochures is planting seeds also. But often we're looking for those decisions out of those meetings, and that's where what we're actually aiming at. But if we have planted seeds through friendship, through kindness, through our bridge events, we probably have more people to reap at the same time. We would want to plant some other seeds in encouraging people to get involved in Bible studies. I have a Bible worker, and she and another lady try to teach classes once or twice a year to congregation members about how to give Bible studies. And I think that's an important element that comes into this. The last thing on my pyramid is then to keep them. It doesn't do any good to bring people in if we're not going to keep them. Would you agree with me?
Well, our stats aren't good when it comes to keeping.
Okay. Russell Burrell told me once, he says, the statistics across North America is that we are keeping them. About 70% of the people we baptize, we are keeping. I was of the belief, when I became an Adventist, that of the 15 or 20 that got baptized, when my family got baptized, that our family was the only one that survived after a year. Now that I'm a pastor and I watch, I've run my statistics. I actually keep track as far back as I'm able to who's still coming and who's not. And my long-term statistics from 2001 on is running about 65 to 72%. Just depends on, one person can shake that considerably. So we're running about 70% retention rate. What I have found happens is, I had a guy come to me one time and he said, why do we do all this evangelism? He says, it doesn't work. I said, what do you mean it doesn't work? He says, nobody comes to it. No, we don't get any decisions out of it. I said, what do you mean? I said, are you saying Pastor Shane's not part of that? Or are you saying I'm not part of that? And I go through a whole bunch of names. He says, you mean so-and-so was baptized? And what I found as the average church member, when they're baptized after an evangelistic series, they get super involved because they're super excited. And the other members, the longtime members, are looking at them, and in the back of their mind and their subconscious saying, that person's been coming here forever because we couldn't have done church without them. They're so integral into what is happening here that we couldn't do church without them. And when I say no, they were just baptized 6 months ago. They were just baptized a year and a half ago. Really? And I started listing the names. And Russell Burrell has done studies across North America and says we're running about 70% retention rate. What we found we lost as at the adventure, and I think it's proving true at my current church, is when we bring in new people, our numbers aren't going up as fast as we're bringing them in, and we're not losing so much of the new people, but we're losing the fringe people who are already at church. But they're not really involved. They just kind of slip in and slip out, and then we're losing those people. They might have been lifetime Adventists. Okay, they're slipping out. In my area, they got other churches to go to, and we're a pretty large church, and so sometimes it's hard to capture them. You know, you don't have a lot of options here. If they don't go to church here, you got one other church in town?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Adventist Church. Yeah.
Adventist church. And then soon you'll have a third Adventist church. But there's not a lot of options, and so if a person slips away just from this community, there's a little more concern about it. But what we're finding is it's fringe people that are actually leaving faster than the new people. The new people are getting involved and picking up some of the pieces. Here's what we've done to keep people. And this is, I think, crucial in developing a culture of outreach and evangelism. Because if you can show the congregation that you're going to reach them and you're going to keep them, that they're more likely to be in favor of what you're doing. And so what we have done is a number of things. The first thing is, after every evangelistic series, we try to start between 2 and 3 small groups. I generally don't try to integrate new people into existing groups. We have about half of our church involved in small groups right now. I don't try to integrate them into an existing group because they're new people, and they get a little cliquish. Cliquish isn't necessarily bad because people are just joining forces with people that they like. But I try to create a new group. So if we just baptize these 4 people, I'm going to get you to come lead a new group of these 4 people. And you and your wife are going to come. And so now you've got a group of 6 people, and we have a new small group going. And at some point in time, you're going to become a leader, and he's going to go on and start another group. Okay? One of the things we do is we try to start 2 to 3 groups so that we can keep them. Another thing we do, and what I do in those groups, I think is not mandatory. But I think it worked better when I was in Colorado, because we did it, what I'm about to tell you, on these groups, than what my associate pastor was doing in my current church. The current church, he just wanted a group to start, and he'd let them study whatever. What we would do in Colorado is we would give them the small group materials for the New Beginnings, thank you. The old Mark Finley evangelistic stuff, New Beginnings. It's been created in a small group format, and it's getting harder and harder to find it. They've reduced the price. They're trying to clear out their inventory, I think, and I'm just wanting to buy it all up. But what we're finding is that when we would start a group to go through that, they watch about a 15 to 20 minute video on a prophecy seminar material. And then they have small group questions built around that. And so that they're studying the same stuff that they just went through in the seminar. And what we find is that people, when they go through the seminar, they got it. They made the decision. And then somebody asks them, why are you going to church on Saturday now? I don't remember. But it's kind of good. You know. And we're finding that if we repeat that material for them, the more often we repeat it, the better they settle in. And so one of the things that we're doing on top of that, so we're doing the New Beginnings small group material. We're also adding to that, on Sabbath morning, I teach a pastor's class after an evangelistic series. It's not an ongoing thing for me. I do it for about 12 weeks, 13, 14 weeks. Just depends on the schedule, what's going on in the church at that point. And what I do is a Bible marking class. And I just say, bring whatever Bible you want. I don't usually give away Bibles at evangelism anymore, but sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But I find that people generally have a Bible sitting around, or we'll give them one if they don't have one. And I said, bring whatever Bible you want. We're going to teach you how to mark it up, and we're going to create a chain reference on the topics that we've just gone through. And you've seen the chain reference things. And I just stand up and I give them a little card that's about this big, with about 15 to 20 texts on it, some less, some more. But I give them the text, and then I just talk about it. I say, let's look up this text. See what this text is trying to say is blah, blah, blah. They mark it. They write the next verse in this margin. We'll go to the next verse, and I talk about it while they're marking it, and we color code them. And I find that those things added to one more thing that I think is crucial to keep them. And that's, we need some kind of social outlet for people. The small group provides some social, because most small groups eat together. and that's a social activity in and of itself. But I had a church when I told you about earlier that we had 40 people coming to church, and we baptized 43 people. That church took it under their wing that they would invite people. Let me take you up to the conference office and show you the Adventist Book Center. It's so cool. You can get all this material. You can get this and that. And they took them there. And sometimes we would have gym nights and volleyball nights and, pizza feeds. And we do all kinds of things all the time. Just creating fun. Fun is ministry. And those things come together. And so much of what happens to create that culture of outreach and evangelism starts at the foundation of friendship. That can be done every day. We can run across the same people. You go to the gas station, go to the same gas station, buy from the same person. I don't know is it only self-serve gas up here? Do you have people actually pump your gas?
Yeah, it's some.
Okay. So sometimes, I don't like to pay the money for somebody else to pump my gas. So I end up pumping my own gas and running the credit card right in the machine. But sometimes I'm thinking, wouldn't it be better if I just went in and paid inside? And so I got to meet somebody and talk to them on a regular basis. Now, my downfall is I go inside and I see those boxes of donuts. And so I'm thinking, for my own health, I don't go in, and also because I'm busy and I always in a hurry. But I'm thinking, what would happen if we would just slow down just long enough to talk to somebody? The Walmart checkout person, whatever. Just long enough to talk to them. That's friendship. Going to the kindness projects and the bridge events, reaping and then the keeping. And I think it's all about the Great Commission. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the earth. I think that's the mission of the church. In my opinion, every mission statement of a church should just be a contemporary restatement of those verses right there. That's what we're called to do. That's the mission of any church. And to show you, if you've been to seminary, if you're a pastor, you might have seen this continuum. I've just called it a life continuum because I don't have it drawn up. A guy that originally created the concept is a guy by the name of Engel, and maybe you've heard of the Engel scale. Engel drew up this life continuum, and if you drew it up, it would look like this. Life goes this. He actually had it segmented in some specific parts, but basically it looks like this. I'm just going to walk through this. There's two basic parts. The first half is evangelism. The second half is discipleship. Somewhere in the middle is the cross. Most of what we do, leading people to the cross, is evangelism. But notice that the discipleship arch goes back before the cross. I know that the church manual says that you can't sing in the choir unless you're a baptized member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I'm like, was it Tom that said last night, the church manual is a guidebook, it's not a rule book. I think we should be getting people involved before they're members.
Amen.
If you can get them involved before they're a member, they're going to be there to stay. And sometimes evangelism goes beyond the cross. Somebody who's come to an evangelistic series, they've accepted the truth that we teach, and they believe what we believe, but they really haven't come to face Jesus yet. And even though they've read the material, they got it up here, that happened to me. I was 12 years old and I went to this evangelistic series. I didn't know where Genesis or Revelation was in the Bible. I didn't know what this one, how do you even say this one book in the Bible called Psalms? What is that? I had no idea what that was about. And the only way I found my way around is the evangelist would say, turn to page 522. Turn to page 644. Whatever. And that's the only way I found my way around. And my dad knew his Bible. My dad was a guy who was raised in an Adventist and gone to Adventist schools his whole life. And yet he would invite the Jehovah's Witnesses in to study with him while he's smoking and drinking, and he'd study the Bible with them to try to prove them wrong. He'd invite the Mormons in just to show them that they were wrong. And when my mom says, I want to take the kids to VBS, he says, that's cool. She says, yeah, my friend's going to take them to the Lutheran church down the street. He stood up and said, not my kids. You're going to take them to a Seventh-day Adventist church or no place at all. You know, and smoke, smoke, drink, drink, smoke, smoke. You know, I mean, it doesn't make any sense, but that's where he was. And so I grew up, and I was baptized as a Seventh-day Adventist because I believed the truth. It was about a year later that I think I came to understand Christ and what He had done for me.
Amen.
So evangelism sometimes goes beyond the cross. Discipleship should start before the cross with as many people as we can. And we don't always have people joining us before they come to Christ. But if they do, let's get them involved. Let's get them moving chairs. Let's get them helping bringing food to the potluck. Whatever it takes, let's begin to disciple them. And there is a journey down that track. Engel and his Engel scale divided it into, I think there were 7 points on each side of the scale to lead people to Christ, and at what stage of the journey they were, and at what stage they weren't. But that's not the end of the road right there. Okay? That's not the end. When you get all the way to the right side of that chart, you are not at the end. Okay? Because it's kind of like climbing a mountain. How many of you have ever climbed mountains? Okay? You have some beautiful mountains west of here. West, which way is west? I get 3 directions when I ask them. Okay, that one. Okay. Beautiful mountains. We crossed through them, and I was like, wow. I mean, the Canadian Rockies are the prettiest mountains. My aunt and uncle used to live up by Prince George, and just at the base of some of the Canadian Rockies. They had a glacier in their backyard, so it was beautiful, beautiful country. I love to climb mountains. But you know what every mountain climber does? Every single mountain climber does, unless they're killed on the mountain, they come down. And you know what else they do? They tell somebody else about their experience. See, if you look at this continuum, it's really not a straight line. We really need to be teaching people to go back and get somebody else and bring up the mountain with them. It's just like climbing a mountain. I'm going to go up the mountain, I'm going to come back down, and I'm going to say, you need to join me, and let's go do it again. C.S. Lewis, in his book, The Great Divorce. Have any of you read much of Lewis's stuff? The Great Divorce is a story, it's an allegory like much of Lewis's stuff was. But it's an allegory of a bus trip between hell and heaven. And it's an oddball story. It's really quite odd as you look through it. But in the end, what it came down to is people were trying to decide, should I go to heaven? Should I stay in hell, or should I go to heaven? And the theology in it is goofed up, okay? But the story is about when they finally decided to go to heaven. It's because somebody else came and got them and led them towards heaven. But before they got there, they said, you know what? I have this burning in my heart to go back and get Joe. I'm going to go back and get him. And I think everybody we lead down that scale from left to right, we need to teach them that you're not fully a disciple until you have gone and gotten somebody else and led them down that journey also. I think that ought to be part of the culture of what we teach. But the problem with teaching that and the vision of some of that is that somebody once said that vision leaks. People get lost and they don't know where they're going about every 28 days. Vision dissipates so quickly. You can cast a vision, people are, yes, that's exciting, let's go. And the next week you talk to them and they're like, well, I think it's pretty good. And the next week it's like, yeah. Okay. And the next week it's like, well, what was that about again, Pastor? You know, vision leaks. It's like pouring vision into a bucket full of holes. It just leaks out. And we need to recast that vision. And I used to think, okay, I'll stand up and recast that vision every 28 days. But if you miss church one week, you're not going to get it for 60 days. Okay? And so I have to cast vision as a pastor every stinking Sabbath. And I do it in all kinds of ways. But I have to do it because if you miss a Sabbath, and you miss a Sabbath, and you miss a Sabbath, and I miss every different Sabbath, if I don't stand up and cast the vision of what we're here for, which is about the Great Commission, then we're missing out. And so I'll stand up at times. Our mission statement is real simple. Reach up in worship, reach deep in discipleship, reach out in evangelism. And we got this cool little logo. I should have brought it up for you to show it. My wife drew it, and I like it. She hates it, but I like it. It's cool. But it's a cool little picture of reaching up, reaching down, and reaching out. And I'll stand up and I'll say, we are, let's see, we just did something recently. But I don't remember in a specific, but I'll stand up and say, this is a classic example of us reaching deep in discipleship. Okay, we had a small group weekend. Okay, we're a training weekend. This is where we are reaching deep into discipleship and learning how to disciple other people, and we are learning other discipleship. And I said, that is an important part of our mission. I said, the other aspects of our mission are to reach up in worship, is what we're doing here this morning, and to reach out in evangelism, which we are gearing up for this fall. And that's a vision cast. I can do it in 5 minutes. Other times I'll preach a sermon about the vision. Other times I'll put it in a newsletter. We also have above every toilet, we have a plastic thing. We drop a thing in every week. We can cast vision. We call it the restroom reader. Beside every stall, in every stall, above every urinal, we have this restroom reader. And so when people don't have anything else to do, they can read about the vision of the church. We have a cartoon there. We have other stuff there. But that's the leader's job. When people don't know where else to go, that they're pointing the direction and saying, let's go that way. If you want to create a culture of evangelism, then you, as the leader of the church, need to be prepared to point the direction. Mm-hmm. If you're not the leader of the church, you can't stand and point direction, though, right? If you're an elder in the church, or just a deacon, or just a Sabbath school teacher, or something else, you can't say, we're going this direction when the pastor says we're going this direction, right? What you have to do, if you're not the key leader in the church, is you got to be an influencer of the key leader. There's a great book. It's called Leading from the Second Chair. And it's talking to assistant pastors. But the focus of the book is, if you're not the key leader, then become a key influencer of the key leader. You can influence. And if you're not the key leader, then you take time to be with your pastor. And you say, I believe we should do this. What do you think? Where are you trying to take us? Can I support that vision? Can I go down that direction? Because the leader's job, and to encourage the leader to stand up and point the direction. Some leaders are standing up saying, I don't know where we're going, and we're just having fun. And sometimes the leader needs to be taught how to point direction. One of my top gifts is leadership. My top gifts are leadership, evangelism, and preaching. None of those am I better than others at. I'm constantly learning those. And so I have people who come to me, Roger, you missed the boat. You should have pointed people this direction. I'm like, you're right. And so next time I do it. And I'm learning constantly. But I know that as we go through and creating a culture of outreach and evangelism, that the leader's job is to point that direction. And so I'm talking about it all the time. I think it was Tom again that brought up last night that the first job of the board meeting, of the church board, is to deal with evangelism. I moved all of my financial stuff and minutes, approval, and church transfers to the last 5 minutes of the board meeting. Because if I don't do it, the finance stuff will just fill up the whole board. Okay? And so what I do is I do a devotional, and then I do 45 minutes where I do training of the church. And all we do is I train the leaders. And I spend time talking about and training them. And right now we're going through how do we reach young adults. Barna has this great curriculum, video curriculum and workbook and stuff on reaching a generation of people who do not see life like we do. They do not see it like we do. It is relative, it is different, and we're watching that. And I got these people in my congregation, they're elders, they're board members, they're 70 years old, and they're standing there going, how do they think that way? And so it creates this huge discussion about how to move, but we're spending the first 45 minutes of every board talking about the mission of the church. You lost me. That is it. That's the name of the course. Is You Lost Me. George Barna. It's barna.org, I believe is the website. Yeah, it's called You Lost Me. And there's a book, there's a DVD, and there's a workbook. And so it's good information. Any other questions?
What program did you use to figure out your gifts that you said, like leadership, evangelism?
I've taken hundreds of spiritual gifts tests, and they all come out pretty much the same. The only time they came out different for me was when I was church planting. They scored me on apostleship. And I'm like, apostle? Wow, I'm feeling pretty good. and it kind of freaked me out, but then I'm like, well, isn't that what apostles do? They start things, they start churches, and that's what I was doing. Another time I was dealing with a bunch of church members I was trying to correct, and I took a spiritual gifts test, and I scored the gift of prophecy. And I'm like, gift of prophecy? And that's when I figured out, we have this idea that the gift of prophecy is Ellen White or is predicting the future. But when you actually look in Scripture, the gift of prophecy is about course correcting the church. That's most of what the prophets did, was corrected the church when they were doing something wrong. And I was in the midst of that when I took that test. And I'm like, well, that makes sense then. I've never scored the gift of prophecy before or since. And so, but yeah, there's all kinds of spiritual gifts stuff. We've used the connections that you can get from Advent Source. So, okay, any other ideas, questions, answers?
Yeah, I will stand up.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for the seminar. The case of my church, for instance, I will use that as a case study. We're just coming up by God's grace. And then I was happy when you listed the steps, that is friendship, evangelism. In our proposal to the conference, proposal of evangelism, these are the things that we listed there that we want to do as a church. Friendship, evangelism, and then all these steps, we mentioned some of them, do not all. We have been trying to mobilize the church, to encourage the church to buy into the idea of witnessing, friendship, evangelism. I am not a church pastor, but we have a church leaders who we're working together as one. But in a situation where we have a church that everybody is time conscious, you hardly have time for any training, you hardly have time for anything outside just the normal sermon and the Sabbath school. What do? How do you get people involved in this kind of situation? In our own case, we don't have our own building. Sometimes we are limited by time. Leave the church at certain time because we want to use our church. So how do we get people involved in this, buy into this idea of evangelism?
Okay. So what I hear you asking is, if you have limited time because renting a facility, you can't use your facility midweek or something like that, or you don't have a place to go, how do you teach people, how do you get them involved? And what we have done, is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, then another one is this issue of members having the time consciousness.
Okay.
By 12 they want to go and resume work. By 11 somebody is trying to get the bus to go back to work.
Yeah, that's found in Hezekiah 4:8. It says we have to be out by 12. That's an Adventist theology. No, I'm joking. Anyway, I don't know where that comes from. That's ingrained. My church is different. My church is trying to get out at 12:30, but we've kind of broken through the 12 barrier, and so it's a little easier. When we didn't have our own facility and we couldn't teach a class like that, sometimes we would break off and do a Sabbath school class, and we would teach some of that information in a Sabbath school class for whoever wanted to join. We only get 15, 20 people, but we did it again. We got another 10 or 15 people. We did it again, we got another 15 people, And so every time we did it, we gathered more support for that process. Other times we've done it in the small groups, in people's homes. And so your group and your group and your group are all meeting separate places, but you're teaching the same curriculum, and you're doing some of that. The other way I've done it is stand up and teach it in sermons. I'll stand up and say, I'm going to do a 6-part series on the vision of the church, and here's what we're about, and here's what we're going to do, and here's why we're going that direction. and outline it from the Bible and how it affects us from application point of view. Okay? Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please, one thing more, please.
Yes?
As a new church coming up, what materials do you recommend for series of training like this for a new church?
You know, Advent Source has probably out of print though. There was a series called Friendship Evangelism. What?
You can still find.
Can you still find it? Okay. It's not Advent Source though. It's was it Heart? Yeah. Okay. So it's Heart Publishing, and Willow Creek Association does this Contagious Christianity course. It's a little complicated. I didn't find it real good. You know, that's probably where I would start. Yeah, might start teaching people about their spiritual gifts through the Connections class, and teaching them through that. You get that through Advent Source, and teaching them about spiritual gifts, and then encouraging them through sermon material or other times to say, "Oh, you got the gift of helps. You should be out helping your neighbor." You know, "Oh, you've got the gift of service. You could be serving in the community as well as here at church." Those kinds of things.
We hit time.
Yes.
We might have folks leave if we.
Okay, I'm done. I'm just closing
Well
up.
done.
So thanks for coming.
Thanks, Roger.